Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today we're exploring a really fascinating concept, something called stream entry. It sits right at that intersection of, ancient spiritual paths and modern psychology. And the key thing here from our sources is that it's not just an idea. It's described as a direct experiential realization, really the first major breakthrough on the path to awakening. And crucially, it's described as irreversible. So our mission today is to try and unpack that, move beyond the jargon, and get into the nuts and bolts of this transition. What does it actually mean for your life day to day? How would you even know you've, entered the stream? And why is it you can't step back out?
Well, looking at the source definition, the name itself is quite revealing, actually.
Yeah.
In Pali, it's Sotapanna. And that literally translates to one who has entered the stream.
Yeah.
The metaphor is pretty powerful, I think. You basically shift from being, a seeker kind of standing on the shore, maybe hoping to find the path, to someone who's actually in the current, a current that flows directly towards, the ocean of full enlightenment. It's presented as this permanent change in how you see things, moving past just reading about reality to directly seeing it.
Yeah, that irreversible part really stands out. But okay, before we dive too deep into what breaks or changes, we probably need the map, right? Because enlightenment isn't usually presented as just one single step. It's often talked about as this monolithic goal, but traditionally the journey's seen in stages.
Exactly. Let's set that historical context first. So the Buddhist framework typically outlines 4 stages of awakening. Stream entry, or Sotana, that's the first one.
Right.
Then comes the once returner, Sakadagami. After that, the non-returner, Anagami. And finally, the Arahant, which represents, full liberation.
Okay, so if that's the map, the stages, what actually moves someone through them? What's the engine here? It sounds like it's more than just meditating more. It involves actively dissolving things. These mental habits, the sources call fetters.
That's precisely it. There are 10 of these deep-rooted mental and emotional habits, the fetters. They're essentially what bind us to the cycle of suffering, which is called samsara.
And we should probably quickly define samsara, too, since it comes up a lot.
Good point. Yeah, samsara is basically that conditioned, often painful cycle of existence we find ourselves in, driven by things like craving and ignorance. So these 10 fetters are like the chains keeping us locked in that cycle. Moving through the 4 stages means systematically, you could say strategically, dissolving these fetters. And stream entry specifically requires the complete dissolution of the first 3.
It's interesting how the modern sort of psychological framing of this makes it sound quite practical, like something with real-world benefits, even though it's described using these ancient terms.
Oh, absolutely. In contemporary views, stream entry is often seen as this permanent, foundational paradigm shift. But crucially, and our sources really emphasize this, the breakthrough doesn't magically erase all your personal issues overnight.
Right. So if you have anxiety, it doesn't just vanish.
Exactly. Your anxiety might still be there,
Yeah.
but your relationship to it changes fundamentally. It shifts the underlying frame of reference.
Yeah.
And that makes healing growth. It makes it feel more natural, more sustainable, perhaps. People often describe it as this profound, unwavering sense of trust. Trust in the path or the universe or just reality itself, even when things feel chaotic.
A kind of anchor. Okay, so to get there, to enter the stream, you need to dissolve those first 3 fetters. Let's really focus on those. The absolute bedrock, you could say, of suffering, these 3 things that have to break.
Okay, the very first fetter to dissolve is the belief in a permanent self. This is that deep, often unconscious assumption that there's a fixed, unchanging I living inside your head somewhere. The feeling that this collection of thoughts, personality, memories, even your body, that this is the solid, unchanging core of who you are.
Okay, wait a minute. If the sources say this belief dissolves, does that mean losing me?
Yeah.
My personality, my memories, everything that makes me unique? I mean, doesn't that sound kind of terrifying to most people?
It's a totally natural question, and it can sound scary, but it's usually a misunderstanding of what actually breaks. You don't lose your functional identity. You still know your name, remember your past, your personality traits are still there. What dissolves is the belief in the permanence and inherent solidity of that identity. It's the direct seeing, the realization that this self is actually a constantly changing process. It's more like a verb than a fixed noun.
Ah, okay.
When fetter 1 breaks, you see the self is more like a river, always flowing and changing, rather than a solid rock.
That makes a huge difference. Seeing it as a process, not a thing. Okay, critical clarity there. What's the second fetter?
The second one is doubt in awakening or enlightenment. This is that deep-seated skepticism. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's totally unconscious, that there's nothing more to life than just, birth, suffering, old age, death. The feeling that some deeper, liberated reality is impossible, or maybe just a nice fantasy. When this fetter breaks, the practitioner gains this immediate, unshakable confidence that the path actually works and that full liberation is genuinely possible.
Okay, belief in self, doubt. What's the third one?
And the third fetter is attachment to rules and rituals. Now, this is the belief that liberation, or even just happiness, depends on strictly following specific behaviors, practices, or maybe ethical rules. And it doesn't matter if those rules are self-created, culturally pushed on you, or part of a religious tradition.
I think when people hear rules and rituals, their mind immediately goes to, monks chanting or specific religious ceremonies. But the sources seem to suggest this fetter is often broken by challenging much more mundane, self-imposed rules we live by.
Exactly right. It's not just about fasting or prayer schedules, though it could be. It could equally be the self-imposed rule that you must maintain some impossible standard of perfection at work, or the ritual of constantly optimizing your diet, thinking this is the key, or rigidly sticking to a specific morning routine, believing that missing it will derail your entire day or life. Breaking fetter 3 really means recognizing that authenticity, genuine engagement with life as it is way more important than just rigidly obeying arbitrary forms.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, because the sources give this great anecdotal example. The author's own awakening story seems to challenge the idea that these fetters have to fall in a neat 1, 2, 3 order.
Yeah, the author's personal account is a fantastic illustration of how it can be more like chipping away at things.
Yeah.
In their experience, fetter 3, that attachment to rules and rituals, actually broke first. They started questioning and then stopping things they felt obligated to do but deep down didn't want to.
Like what kind of things?
Things like maintaining relationships they knew were toxic, or going through the motions of holiday traditions they disliked. Basically choosing their inner sense of truth over external pressure or habit.
Okay, so fetter 3 first, then what?
Then fetter 1, the belief in a permanent self, that broke later. And interestingly, not through years of formal meditation in this case, but through intense self-inquiry. Specifically, realizing they had no direct moment-to-moment control over which thoughts popped into their head.
The I can't control my thoughts, so how can they be me realization?
Precisely. That led to this radical disidentification.
And the second fetter, the doubt.
That one broke last in their story, but quite dramatically. It involved what they describe as a mystical experience. But for our listeners, think of it less like seeing visions and more like a profound, undeniable feeling of affirmation. A moment of overwhelming acceptance, a direct sense of some loving presence or intelligence in the universe, which led to absolute trust. Once that deep trust landed, the full realization stream entry followed almost immediately. So the sequence was 3, 1, 2.
Wow.
It really shows that the experience isn't always a linear checklist. It's more like a landscape shifting.
Yeah. That makes sense. Regardless of the order, though, what seems really fascinating is the practical effect this has. Especially the change in your relationship with your own thoughts. That seems central.
Absolutely. That transformation in how you relate to thought is probably one of the most liberating aspects. Before awakening, let's say, you're essentially inside your thoughts, right? You take them as absolute truth. Identification is total. I'm having this fearful thought, therefore I am afraid. Or I want this, therefore I am this craving. The internal story dictates reality.
So what's the immediate after then? If you're not inside the story anymore, where are you? Observing it.
Pretty much. At stream entry, there's this direct experiential seeing that thoughts are just mental events. They arise, they hang around for a bit, they pass. They're phenomena, just like a sound you hear, or a feeling in your body, or a fleeting emotion. They aren't automatically believed anymore. They aren't clung to or immediately acted upon as commands. You gain distance. You move from being totally submerged in the mental river to having a clear viewpoint on the bank, watching it flow by.
That sounds incredibly powerful. So if a thought of, say, self-criticism arises, you can see it as just a thought cloud passing rather than feeling like I'm fundamentally flawed.
Exactly. And this is where that term irreversible really hits home.
How so?
Well, think of it like seeing how an optical illusion works. Once someone points out the trick, or you see the hidden image, you can never quite go back to only seeing the initial illusion. The mechanism has been revealed, you see.
Right. You can't unsee it.
You can't unsee it. You might still feel the pull of old habits. The tendency to identify with thoughts is strong. But you can't genuinely fully believe that the thought is you anymore. Not in the same way. That direct knowing, that realization is permanent.
And the result for you, the listener, sounds like an immediate and pretty substantial drop in mental suffering. Because those thoughts about fear or wanting things or beating yourself up, they lose their power when you see them as just temporary events. The mind isn't constantly fighting or chasing its own content anymore.
It really is a profound psychological decoupling. However, and sources are very clear on this is a massive beginning, but it's definitely not the end of the journey. Practitioners need to continue with, well, humility and persistence. There's still a path ahead.
Okay, that's important. So what are the typical hurdles or challenges people face after hitting this huge milestone? You've broken the foundation, maybe, but the house still needs work, right?
Right. The sources point to a few common challenges that often remain. First is simply integration into daily life. Having this profound insight into reality can actually feel quite jarring, even destabilizing, when you go back to your normal routine.
Like, how do you reconcile cosmic consciousness with doing the dishes?
Exactly. How do you square this sense of infinite connection with paying the bills or dealing with difficult colleagues? The two realities can seem to clash.
Makes sense. What else?
Second is residual conditioning. Just because those first three core beliefs are broken doesn't mean all your old patterns of attachment, aversion, or ignorance just evaporate. Remember, there are still 7 more fetters to work through. Deep habits still operate. For example, even if the core belief in a permanent self is gone, the habit of maybe craving external validation or reacting angrily to criticism, those patterns can still arise and need ongoing work.
Okay, integration, old habits. What's the third?
And the third one is a tricky one: spiritual ego. The very ego that supposedly dissolved can kind of sneak back in and puff itself up around this achievement.
Yeah.
The mind might start thinking, wow, I am a stream enter, which can lead to subtle arrogance, or maybe feeling separate from others who aren't at that stage. It takes ongoing self-awareness to keep that humility on the path.
That absolutely makes sense. The mind is always trying to grasp onto something to define itself, even its own realization of no self. So when we look back at the practices that might lead up to stream entry, it sounds like the key isn't necessarily rigid discipline, but tell me more about authentic investigation.
Very much so. That tension around Fetter 3, the rules and rituals, seems really central here. The sources strongly suggest that actually thinking for yourself, really feeling into what actions feel truly authentic to your deepest knowing, and prioritizing honest self-inquiry. That's far more powerful than just blindly trying to follow a list of rules, whether they're yours or someone else's. Rigid adherence can actually block the breaking of Fetter 3.
And for listeners who are drawn to this and want to investigate these foundational beliefs for themselves, the sources do offer some structured, practical ways to do that self-reflection, right? Can you give an example?
Yes, definitely. Take the rule inventory practice, for instance. It's aimed squarely at Fetter 3. The practice itself is simple on the surface, but it can be quite profound. You just sit down and make a list. List every single rule you consciously or unconsciously follow in your daily life. Could be cultural norms, family expectations, diets, work habits, moral codes, anything.
Okay, get it all down on paper, then what?
Then you go through the list, item by item, and question each rule systematically. Ask yourself, where did this rule come from? Who told me this? What's the actual real-world consequence if I break it? Does following this rule genuinely contribute to my well-being? Or does it just feed some old anxiety or conditioning? It's this process of testing your assumptions against reality that really drives the awakening process.
That's a powerful tool. Okay, so let's try and summarize the core insight we're exploring today. Stream entry isn't just a milestone. It's this radical reorientation, a direct, undeniable experiential shift. It breaks that fundamental belief in a fixed, permanent self. It dissolves deep doubt about whether a deeper reality or liberation is possible. And it frees you from blindly relying on arbitrary, conditioned rules and rituals. You're no longer just looking at the stream, you're in it. And you can't mistake the feeling of being in the current for standing on the shore ever again.
Beautifully put. And that brings us right back to that tension we talked about, authenticity versus obligation, which seems so key to this path. Given that the whole journey encourages thinking for yourself, questioning, conditioning, breaking free from unnecessary rules, maybe we can leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over this week, a sort of reflective question. What is just one single belief, or maybe a rule, could be about how you should spend your time, manage your career, relate to others, anything really? Just one rule you follow today that you could gently question. Just experiment. Just see who you are, what you feel, what you truly desire. When you temporarily step outside of that particular boundary, what happens then?